So a little bit over a year ago, I got on the journey of wanting to memorize the Quran. And alhamdulillah, since then, I memorized about 200 pages of Quran while also working, while also in school. And trust me, it definitely didn't start easy at all. And I'm really not trying to say this to brag. It's more so that I'm not actually special like whatsoever. And if I could do something like that, there's probably so many people around the world who have the potential to complete their hifz, to complete the entire Quran, but they never even really started. The truth is, it's really just a replicable system that lies behind a few habit changes that you might have to introduce to your life. So inshallah, in this video, I'm going to try to give you exactly how I did it, literally from stage one all the way to where I am now. And inshallah, maybe you can take some bits from it and introduce it into your life and also get on this journey. So I literally started from stage one, literally not even knowing how to read the Quran. I know a lot of people who grew up and their parents put them in those schools where they learned to read the Quran, they learned tajweed when they were really young. Unfortunately, I never got this opportunity. So I literally had to learn at like 21 years old. I was in Zoom calls online with my sheikh, and I was learning how to read Arabic and then learning how to read Quran properly, learning the rules of tajweed, all that stuff. And the way I personally went about doing this is I consumed a lot of like free stuff online, how to learn how to read Arabic, which I'll link below, and also just like paid stuff. I hired an online teacher. And when I just kind of combined both those strategies, I actually learned like way faster than maybe the average person who's trying to do it like just on the side part-time according to their own schedule. Literally just within a few weeks, I was already able to read the Quran, even though it was maybe super slow. I was at least able to read the language it was revealed in. So one of the first tips I'll give you is if you want to like progress fast, if you're on the hip journey, or even if you're like in the beginning of it, I would just say like really try to find a program, find a teacher that you can revise your Quran to. And inshallah, that's what we have in our community. The link will be in the description, but it's actually meant to keep people accountable and to give you that kind of push, that motivation to keep memorizing, to keep going on the journey. But personally, that's exactly how I started, literally just the pure foundations. You might be more advanced than me where you didn't really have to do that. But personally, I had to start with literally like ground zero, learning Arabic, learning tajweed before even getting into memorizing. And the next thing I did after I got like these basic exams, I actually started revising Quran to my sheikh. So a lot of the surahs I memorized when I was a kid, just from listening or just from like family or whatever like that, just the popular ones we all know, I would actually revise that to my teacher. From there, I found out that a lot of stuff I memorized was actually incorrect tajweed, incorrect stuff. Because this is one of the problems when you don't actually like read the Quran in Arabic is that you might be memorizing with the transliteration, but that kind of sounds a little bit different than when you're actually memorizing like in the actual languages revealed in while also knowing the rules of tajweed. So essentially I had to restart my memorization again, literally from ground zero. And to remind you, I've never actually even tried this in the past where I would try to actually like memorize a certain amount of Quran and then like progress it the next day and then revise it and train it. I never got in the system, the cycle at all. So I started literally just by memorizing maybe what I thought was a lot at the time, but maybe just like a third of the page and then presenting it to my sheikh the next week. So then essentially from this, I just started memorizing like maybe a third of a page a day, obviously with like ups and downs on the journey. But then I eventually got to the point where Juz Amma was memorized and the 29th Juz was memorized and I think even the 28th was memorized. And I kind of started seeing like the plan ahead of me. I started realizing, okay, so this is how people do it. Because to remind you, like when I was younger, I thought the only people who memorized Quran were like people who were like super strict, like living in the desert out here memorizing. I thought there was no way someone who's actually in like the normal everyday day-to-day system can memorize. You might be asking like, how did you actually build the habit for this? Because there's a lot of people out there who might have the desire to do this, but they actually quit pretty quickly into it just because they never really built it like as an easy habit into their daily lives. You got to understand, like if you want to make a real good progress in terms of your memorization, the Quran needs to be like a seamless habit where like day in, day out, you're memorizing and it's almost frictionless where you don't really feel it as difficult because this is something that requires like time. So for some context, when I was younger, I used to waste like a lot of time. And I remember even before I got on this hip journey, I started researching like how to build like better habits, started reading books on it. And there was a few takeaways that I learned just from even like Western people saying like how to build better habits that actually applied to the Quran. And one of the main pieces of advice that I'd give you if you want to make Quran like a seamless habit is don't actually start off with doing too much time to it or making it kind of difficult into your life. This is actually why most people fall off their memorization. It's because they thought they had this big spike of like motivation. Okay, boom, let's go. I'm gonna learn all this stuff. I'm gonna learn Arabic. I'm gonna learn how to memorize. And then they start dedicating a lot of time to it. And then it kind of feels difficult and then you fall off. Where it's much better to like really ease it into your daily life, almost to the point where you don't even notice it. And then you just start with very small little chunks of learning, chunks of memorizing. And then over time you grow off of it because this is exactly what I did. At the beginning, there was times where I literally wasn't even memorizing. I was just revising like a third of the page. And then I was memorizing something new, like a third of the page. And then slowly over time, I used to expand the amount of time I was dedicating to it because it felt more like natural. It felt more normal to me. Human beings are really creatures of habit. As soon as you introduce a new habit that might seem like kind of foreign, you're just going to be like wanting to kick it. Whereas if you introduce it super like lightly into your life where you almost don't even feel it, and then you slowly expand it, you'll just adjust to it and it'll become like kind of a part of you. So some actual like tactical ways I would go about doing this is what I personally did is I downloaded a habit tracker where I put on that habit tracker the amount of time I'd want to memorize Quran. So in the beginning, I think it was honestly just like 30 or 45 minutes. I would want to dedicate a day to either revising or memorizing Quran. And then now, alhamdulillah, I got to the point where it's like 2.5 hours. So I would advise you do the same thing in the sense that you actually like start with a small amount, a small time goal you want to hit, not necessarily a page goal or like an actual quantity goal, because the amount of pages you memorize, that's kind of like a skill and it comes with time. So don't over focus on that. Specifically focus on like the amount of time that you're dedicating to it. Now, another one of these tactics that I did was actually like make my routine and implement Quran memorization in that particular routine. So what I mean by this, like I had a routine in general just so I didn't like lose track of what I had to do, whether it was like work, school, or just like stuff around the dunya. But I never actually factored in like Quran memorization into it. Once I got on the journey, I was thinking, okay, I need to make this like a non-negotiable, the same way I go to class, the same way I do work, the same way. This needs to be like a real part of my life. So essentially, I would look at my schedule that I had the next day. I look at my routine and stuff I had to do, and I would just plot points where I could memorize at a specific location at a specific time where I knew I would be able to do it. Some days it would be in the morning, like immediately after I wake up. Some days it would literally be like at class, at work. Some days it would be later in the day. But I would just set 2 specific times, a time where I had to revise the previous things I memorized, and another time where I had to memorize something new. And I honestly think that if I was able to find 2 slots in the day to do this, that most people out there, no matter how busy you are, could also probably do this. So there's really no excuses. And also, if you want some resources like a habit tracker, Quran tracker, and all this stuff, you can feel free to find it in our community, inshallah, it's inside. But the next thing I did is I dedicated a lot of my dead time and I got more aware of it, and I tried dedicating it to kind of being productive with the Quran somehow. No matter who you are, we always have these periods in the day where we have some dead time, whether it's walking, eating, whatever it is. You have these periods of maybe 15, 10, 30 minutes, whatever it is, that you're not really doing anything, but you could also use that time a little bit more productively in terms of the Quran. It doesn't mean that you have to memorize a particular page in like 10 minutes or even revise in that particular time. But what I used to do is like I'd be on like the bus or walking, and I would just listen to the page I was going to memorize later on the day on repeat. And essentially what this does is it softens up your kind of like memorization muscles. It gets you more familiar with the words that you're going to be memorizing later. So when you actually come to memorize it, it flows much easier, and you tend to memorize that much quicker than if you were to start and it was like a totally foreign page. And to be honest, it doesn't even have to be the particular page you're memorizing. There's pages that I'm listening to now that I already memorized, and I'm not even close to that point in the Quran yet. Literally just from listening to it because I like the way it sounded, and day in, day out, I'll listen to it. Eventually, you're just going to familiarize yourself with it so much that you'll memorize it. This is honestly like part of the beauty of the Quran, is that even if you don't know the language, even if you don't know the terminology, the meaning or anything like that, that the Quran has literally been made easy to memorize. So who's gonna be doing the memorizing? This is like a part of the benefit of this journey, is that it's not like memorizing something else where it takes like, it's mad difficult. This is like way easier than anything else. I mean, this is not really related to the video, but think about how crazy it is that there's like millions of people who memorize the entire Quran. They don't even speak Arabic. They don't even like really know the language like that. They don't know the meaning, but that's how easy it's been made to memorize. But anyway, as for the next stage is really stage 3, and this is actually like execution, how to actually execute in terms of memorizing, and how to get like technical about it, how to actually do the memorizing essentially. Now I'm actually going to jump on my laptop and show you exactly like how I personally memorize as of now. Obviously there's like different strategies and this changes over time, but there's some like particular principles that have stuck with me this entire time. So I'll go ahead and show you right now. Now, in general, it's good to use the same exact mushaf when you're memorizing, because part of the way you memorize is actually taking like a visual picture of the page, right? So you know it's at the top of the page, the bottom of the page, the middle of the page, and it makes it like much easier in terms of like recalling what you memorize when you use the same exact mushaf. However, in my scenario, I always wanted to listen to the page before I memorized it. And the most efficient way to do that personally was honestly just memorizing off of my phone. Now, you know, that can be kind of dangerous because your phone's a huge distraction. There's actually kind of some benefits to it in terms of like, I was able to memorize in places you might not think that you could, right? Because if you have to listen to a page before you memorize it to make sure you're memorizing it correctly, you might not be able to do that like with the actual physical mushaf when you're outside or something like that. But with a phone, alhamdulillah, I was able to do that. So I'm going to show you the exact like app that I downloaded that allowed me to do that. So if you type in Quran on your app store, one app will pop up and looks like this. It's this particular one right here. It's by Quran.com. It's a really popular one. But essentially the reason I chose this one is because when you open it, it allows you to actually play audio from the page you're memorizing. So let's say I'm on this surah in Surah Al-Ankabut. There's these 3 dots at the bottom, as you can see. And once you click on that, you can actually customize exactly like the page you want to memorize, and it will lock onto that particular page. You can see that you can repeat it on a loop or on a per particular set of verses, and you can just keep listening to it like that on repeat. And again, like I said earlier, essentially what that does is it warms up your memory. Not only so when you actually come to revise it or memorize it, you're doing it with a correct tajweed because you should listen to it beforehand. But also it kind of familiarizes you with it. So when you do come to memorize it, you're doing it much faster. So that's how I would set up the memorization. But now in terms of like how to actually memorize, obviously there's multiple strategies. You probably know of some, your family's probably told you some, you probably watched different YouTube videos. And to be honest, they all work. So just find what works for you. But one particular one I'm doing right now is I'll just listen to a particular page, right? So let's say, like I showed you earlier, I'll put this whole page on lock. I'll just listen to it. And then I'll just start reading the entire page while looking at it, right? So from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, I'll just read it multiple times. Again, just familiarizing with myself with it. And by the time you do that for like a lot of times, you'd be surprised. You probably already memorized like a few lines, maybe even a few ayahs. And especially if you're kind of like more experienced on this, you might memorize the entire page pretty quickly. But personally, I'm not there yet. So then from that point, after I've read the entire page, maybe like, I'll say like 20 times, 30 times. Then I'll go one by one ayah and just start reading it and then start recalling it from memory. And if I mess up, I'll just read it again and I'll just keep getting the cycle where let's say I'm reading this first ayah and then I'll try to go from memory. And then if I can't get it from memory, I'll just keep reading it over and over and then keep trying to plant it in my memory. Once that's planted, you do the same thing for the second one. And then you lock them both in and then you recite them both purely from memory. And you just keep on the cycle until whatever your goal is, you finish the page or you finish the half the page, or however much that you can do that particular day. So like I said, once you actually kind of get used to this, memorizing isn't really the hard part. It's actually revising and holding on to what you've memorized in the past. And currently this is actually a problem I'm having. And the way I'm trying to solve it is kind of reallocating the time I'm dedicating to the Quran. So instead of previously when I just started, a lot of my time was going to memorization. Now I actually want most of my time to go to revising. Now, if you're just getting started, you might not have to really worry about this because if you don't have that much of the Quran memorized, you won't really obviously need to revise as much. Whereas the longer you've been doing this, you actually have a lot to revise and a lot that you may have just forgotten entirely. So currently the amount of time that I'm trying to dedicate is usually like around 2 hours a day. But before I used to split it as in I would do maybe an hour and a half of memorizing and then just 30 minutes of revising or maybe an hour. Whereas now I actually want to dedicate most of that time to revising and then maybe only a small amount of time to memorizing. Now you might be thinking, oh wait, am I even going to be able to memorize a good amount then? But you also have to realize that once you've been memorizing for a while, you tend to actually memorize pretty quick. So even though you might be memorizing now for only 30 minutes, 20 minutes, that could still be a page if you're someone who's been doing this for a while. Another thing that I've been doing, and I think it's really beneficial, especially if you're a beginner, is that on the weekends or whenever you have this kind of focused, concentrated time, try to actually meet with someone who knows Quran and try to revise to them. And specifically try to revise the page that you most recently memorized, because let's say you've made a mistake in that memorization, it's not so firm in your memory where if a mistake is corrected that you can't fix it because it's so deep in your memory. If it's something that you've kind of recently memorized, you will be able to correct it, inshallah. And again, if you're looking for a place to do this, feel free to join our school community. The link will be in the description. And inside, we host revision calls every single weekend where you can present what you memorized and inshallah be corrected and get some feedback. Now, once I actually implemented all these habits and I got to the point where I am now, I started realizing stage 4, which is essentially just compounding. Now, essentially in every goal, there's kind of this start where it's really difficult. And then eventually over time, after a while, you actually start making progress at 5 times the amount of speed that you're making it in the beginning. And actually so far, I've realized that the Quran actually isn't too different from that. Just from my experience, I've realized now, alhamdulillah, I'm able to memorize way faster now than I did in the beginning. And even from talking to people in the community, even they've said that they're memorizing way quicker now than when they first started. And you can expect this trajectory to happen. So don't get too discouraged when you're starting off and maybe it's really slow. Maybe you have to dedicate some time just to memorize a small amount. And you think this whole journey is going to be like that, because in reality, it probably won't. SubhanAllah, sometimes I think when I started, those times where I'm not even lying, I would dedicate 2 hours a day to memorize one page. And now that I'm thinking about it, I actually can't believe that I did that. I can't believe that I stuck with that. Because now, it doesn't take that long at all. There's a lot of mutashabihats in the Quran, meaning there's a lot of things that sound similar to similar verses, sometimes even the exact same verses that might appear different times in the Quran. So once you familiarize it with yourself just in the beginning a little bit, things just get smoother and smoother and you'll be able to memorize faster and faster. You can kind of think about it like pushing a rock up a mountain where obviously the beginning is very hard. And then you get to a point where it stabilizes and then alhamdulillah, it gets to a point where it starts going very fast. So honestly, if you're in that first 3 to 5 juz and you're still kind of feeling that pain, just know it's totally natural, but you're almost at the point where it's going to get much easier, inshallah. I remember this idea alone was one of the only things that kept me going when I was at the beginning of the journey. It took me really long to memorize one page or half a page. I remember I would listen to some podcasts online and people would say the same thing, that when they started, it was really difficult. But now that they're maybe months or years into the journey, they're able to memorize maybe a page in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And it kind of shocked me. I was if I could get to that point, then it would be so much easier. So with that said, it kind of brings me to stage 5 of this entire journey, which is really the mindset that you need to adopt. Because let's be honest, if you're close to my generation, we've gotten used to things being way too quick, way too fast. And if we don't see progress quickly, we usually just kick the habit altogether. Or in reality, the Quran, you really have to be patient with this progress. Because on a day-to-day level, you might be thinking I'm barely making any progress. I'm only memorizing half a page, a third of a page, or maybe even one page, but it still doesn't feel like a lot out of something that's 604 pages. And you might be thinking, is this even worth it? Because trust me, I've had these thoughts a lot. Is this even worth it? Should I even keep going? Should I just stop here and just try to hold on to what I memorized? But trust me, it might seem a little bit day to day, but when you zoom out and months pass and you realize, whoa, I already memorized this much and it didn't really feel that long, that's when you start feeling the gratitude that you actually started memorizing in the first place. And again, like I said earlier, is you have to understand that this doesn't really stay as difficult as it is in the beginning. If you kind of adopt the mindset that right now, what you're doing right now is the most difficult that it'll get, and it's only going to get easier from here, inshallah, will keep you kind of on the path of it. I would also say is don't get too discouraged on this journey. If you miss a particular day, don't think, okay, it's gone for me, I'm going to just stop altogether. Try to always just get in the habit. And like I said earlier in the beginning of this, is try to make it seamless into your day, almost the same as brushing your teeth, eating food. Try to make it so you don't really feel it. It's just a habit into your day. Because when you get it to that point, and then slowly you can dedicate more time to it. That's how you become someone who's always revising, always memorizing, and it becomes like a part of your identity. And that's how you like really strengthen your memorization. Other thing that I would say that definitely helped me with my mindset is definitely trying to find other people doing this. We all know like the studies, everyone knows when you do stuff with other people who are also trying to get that same goal, it makes you much more motivated. It makes you much more likely to actually hit that goal. And if we're being honest, there's not that many people who also have this goal, like to memorize, especially if you're in the West. So it might feel like a little bit lonely. You might not have that sense of urgency. Okay, I got to memorize. And again, if you want to replicate that feeling, feel free to join our school community, inshallah, because inside you'll see people who are finishing their Quran, finishing their entire hifd, people who've just memorized new surah and stuff. And it kind of always puts that seed in your mind, like, oh, people are doing it, I got to do it as well. And these are really the achievements to look back on and be proud. Because even now, sometimes I think back, I'm like, I'm really surprised I even like stuck with it this whole time, because my kind of like personality growing up and like just overall identity when I was growing up was someone I was like really impatient. I needed always things like quick. Like if it was, I just got used to the whole technology lifestyle, the whole generation we grew up in. So if you don't see quick results, usually I would kick it, quit it altogether. But this time has been a little bit different, where I've actually been consistent on it for quite a while now. So inshallah, this was a benefit. I tried writing down everything like my entire kind of journey through this process. And inshallah, I distributed it for your benefit. And again, if you want to join a community, inshallah, where every weekend we're hosting revision calls, tajweed feedback, or also just like general feedback while you're on this head journey, feel free to join our community, inshallah. And I'll see you inside. Assalamu alaikum.